Welcome to the first video on the third meditation. So as we've seen, Descartes regards the possible existence of a deceiving God as a very slight and, so to speak, metaphysical reason for doubt. Nevertheless, he thinks, in order to remove even this slight reason for doubt, as soon as the opportunity arises, I must examine whether there is a God, and if there is, whether he can be a deceiver, for if I do not know this, it seems that I can never be quite certain about anything else. And so in meditation 3, Descartes turns to proving the existence of God. We're going to see that Descartes gives 3 proofs of God's existence, 2 in this meditation and 1 in meditation 5. At the crux of all of these proofs is going to be a move that resembles the move that Plato makes in his proof of the immortality of the soul using the safe and sophisticated account of change. So keep an eye out for this move in each of the 3 proofs. So in proving God's existence in meditation 3, we'll find out what God is, what his essence is, his nature. Just like how in proving my existence, I found out what I am as a thinking thing, precisely and strictly speaking. Or how in examining the wax, we figured out what it is as an extended thing. To get rid of childish images of God, God is not some powerful king or wind. God is not some gray-bearded guy on a cloud. God will not be like any of these images. Rather, just as we found an innate idea of myself as a thinking thing, or of the wax as an extended thing, we're going to find that we have an innate idea of God. And we'll see why this idea must come from God, and why it must represent God as he is, and why any thinking thing will have such an idea. The key for showing that our idea of God must be how God in fact is will depend on the structure of representations. To see how this works, let's start with a relatively straightforward case. So something is presented to me in an accident or mode of thinking, and something can only be present to me through such an accident or through representing. After all, if you want to show up in court, you must be represented, either by yourself or by an attorney. The attorney speaks for you. She is your representation. So take, for example, my sensation of the sun. So I've got the sun, and then I sense. I sense the sun, right? And take, for example, I sense the sun. The sun is present in my mind by being represented. It's through my idea of the sun that the sun shows up in the court of my mind. So the sun can exist in 2 ways, either outside me in the world or in my mind, if there really is a sun. Now, Descartes will distinguish 2 kinds of truth. What are they? Well, precisely only judgments can be true or false. But in an extended sense, ideas can be true to what they're ideas of, or false of what they're ideas of. So sometimes sensible ideas can appear to be real, to represent an object a certain way, to have an objective reality, when they don't. And Descartes will call this material falsity. Whereas he'll call judgments formal falsity. So there's judgments, and then ideas. And if ideas represent their object falsely or incorrectly, then they're materially false, whereas judgments can be formally false. So those are the two kinds of falsity. So why do I think my ideas derived from sensible things resemble the things in the world? We'll see that Descartes thinks this is, in a way, the primary mistake, the mistake of resemblance. He thinks it's merely apparent objective reality. So an example he gives is of heat and cold. So before thermodynamics, it wasn't clear whether one of these was the privation of the other, and if so, which one, right? I mean, is heat the absence of cold, or is cold the absence of heat? It's not immediately clear from the ideas, right? Or take the sun. I have two ideas of the sun. One of my ideas I formed from the senses when I look up into the sky and see that tiny ball of fire, that tiny bright ball, and I think, oh, the sun, it's about the size of a marble, right? That's how the senses present the sun to me. But I also form another idea of the sun, that it's 93 million miles away, and that's why it looks small. But in fact, you know, it's millions of times the size of the Earth. And so one of my ideas of the sun represents it as being very small, whereas the other represents it as being very large. And so then the question is, well, how can I be sure which of these is the right idea? And in both the heat-cold example and in the sensory idea of the sun example, I can't be sure that the idea represents things as they actually are. Both of these ideas might be materially false. I have no way of telling. Or I at least right now, until I can separate the sensory ideas from the ideas of reason, right? Until I can do that, I'm not going to be able to tell. So the issue with resemblance is that I often find myself with sensory ideas, like my sensory idea of the sun, where the things don't really they don't really resemble the things out there in the world, right? And so I'm faced with a problem. And in general, this pursuit of God, of a proof of God's existence, presents Descartes with a problem. Under what conditions am I justified in taking any of my ideas as true representations of things existing outside me? Because under what conditions am I justified in inferring from the presence of a certain idea to the existence of the object represented by that idea? Here, Descartes argues the greatest mistake we can make is to operate on the assumption that our ideas in general resemble external objects, that there's a form between my sensible species of the sun and the sun itself, right? That there's a form that's shared by my sensory idea of the sun and the sun, that where the form resembles the sun. So Descartes says, although nature, that is habit, teaches me to believe that my ideas come from things outside me, which they exactly resemble, I find this assumption is often mistaken, as in the case of my sensory idea of the sun. And so, Descartes says, all of these considerations are enough to establish that it is not reliable judgment, but merely some blind impulse that has made me believe up till now that there exist things distinct from myself which transmit to me ideas or images of themselves through the sense organs or in some other way. We therefore need another way of investigating whether some of the things which I possess ideas of exist outside of me. It's going to turn out that the senses are like a blind person's cane. So when I sense the sun causes the sensation in me. Just as when the blind person bumps into the sidewalk curb, the bumping causes the stick to be pushed back, right? And so the blind person is able to feel that there's something there, right? Similarly, when I sense the sun, I'm bumping into the sun. I know there's something there, but the blind person doesn't get a picture of what they're bumping into. They just know there's something there, but they don't get an idea that represents the thing that they're bumping into unless they have a fuller picture of what's going on. Similarly, Descartes thinks the sun bumps into my sense organs and I get an idea of the sun. It causes an idea, but that idea doesn't really give me a picture of the sun. It doesn't really represent the sun. It doesn't really resemble the sun. And so while I get a sensory idea of the sun from the sun, my sensory idea is caused by the sun. I can't trust that idea resembles the sun, that there's some formal connection between my sensation of the sun and the sun. So in meditation 3, Descartes is going to be looking for an idea of something such that what is represented in it must correspond to something that exists outside me. That is, he's going to be asking, is there an idea in me representing something outside me such that I know the thing caused the idea and that the thing must be as I represent it? And it'll turn out I only have one such idea in me, and that's of a thing. I only have one such idea in me of a thing outside me that represents this thing as it must in fact be, and that idea is going to be God, my idea of God. Okay. In the next video, we will turn to the first steps in Descartes' investigation of that idea and the proof that God exists.